Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of On The Grid Podcast, Season 5, Episode 11. It's been quite a while since we've recorded one of these podcasts, but we are back after a little bit of a break in between China and Japan. We're back recording the Japanese Grand Prix review and the Bahrain Grand Prix preview. I'm your host, Adrian. Joining me as ever is my co-host, EP11. Ethan, how are you feeling? How are you? What did you make of the Japanese Grand Prix? Bit of a ball fest, wasn't it?
I definitely regret getting up for the Japanese Grand Prix. It was an absolute waste of time. It almost sent me back to sleep. Yeah, it wasn't one for the history books, was it?
No, I'm also in the same boat as you. I really regret getting up at I believe I actually got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was anticipating the Japanese Grand Prix. But yeah, nothing really happened in the race. It was it sort of gave me Monaco vibes where the Saturday, the qualifying session was the main entertainment. But let's talk about qualifying. Let's talk about Q1. So in Q1, the top three was Oscar Piastri, George Russell, and Lando Norris, with the bottom five consisting of the two Sauber cars of Nico Hulkenberg outqualifying Gabriel Bortoleto. In 18th was the Haas of Esteban Ocon. In 19th was the Alpine of Jack Doohan. And in 20th, Lance Stroll. Let's talk about Stroll because he started the season off relatively okay. But then we see this massive drop off and he qualifies 20th for the Japanese Grand Prix. Ethan, what can we really said about Stroll? Because I don't think, when it comes to qualifying and when it comes to the Japanese Grand Prix, we like we've seen in the last couple of races, the gaps are so close. But when it came to, I believe it was Lance Stroll and Jack Doohan, they were just nowhere to be seen. I think maybe Jack a little bit wary after his crash on the Friday. But with Lance, it's just the pace was just nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, he almost had us fooled from the first couple of races, but this is sort of the Lance Stroll that we almost expect, isn't it? He was half a second off of 19th place Jack Doohan, who in turn with a couple of tenths off of 18th. So yeah, it was a shocking weekend for him. Yeah, and I don't necessarily think the pace was quite there in the Alpine this weekend. Obviously, Jack Doohan had that big accident in practice, which was just pure stupidity, thinking he can take DRS into turn one, like it's the F1 game. But it is what it is. I think he's had some decent qualifying so far, Jack Doohan. He obviously was thereabouts in, I think it was in China in sprint qualifying. He actually outqualified Gasly. He's been around Gasly's pace, but this was just a poor weekend from him.
That's obviously regarding Lance Stroll as well, because we were talking about Lance Stroll. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Jack Doohan a little bit more. Obviously on the Friday, he had that big crash heading into turn one, forgetting to turn off of the DRS flap heading into the first corner. Rookie mistake. Forgetting to close the flap is, and would you just simply put it down as a rookie error and him just not thinking straight, not engaging the brain cells heading into turn one?
No, it wasn't him forgetting to turn it off. It was him not turning it off. I think he said afterwards in the simulator he did it and it worked. But this isn't the F1 game, and he's costing the team a lot of money in a cost cap era. So maybe if this sort of thing happens on a frequent basis, then there's going to be some issues with Alpine bringing upgrades because they're going to have to spend more money actually rebuilding the car than they'd want to. But I don't think it's driver error. I think a rookie mistake. I think it is just a rookie miscalculation. Trying to be a bit too clever. I think it's almost as if with all of the stories surrounding him and his Formula One seat and, it being portrayed as a matter of time until Colapinto's in that seat, maybe he wants to go above and beyond rather than just not keeping his head down, doing what he can, doing his talking on the track. He's almost having to do these extra bits to stand out. But in this case, it didn't work.
And obviously, the driver that he replaced Esteban Ocon. He qualified in 18th. Ocon, in turn, out-qualified by Ollie Behrman, who had a fantastic weekend in Japan. What do you think went wrong with Ocon? I think the Haas the Haas has shown some potential, especially in China. It showed signs of improvement and going in the right direction. But with Esteban Ocon, it just kind of seemed to be going back down to earth and back in the wrong direction, especially in qualifying.
You never know. It could just be that it just couldn't get the lap together. It could be as simply explained as that. I don't think that necessarily it has to be this major issue. I think Ollie Behrman was able to extract performance in the car when Esteban Ocon wasn't. So it could just be as simple as that. But let's see what happens in the weeks to come. I can't say I watched qualifying because I didn't. So I'm not sure what went wrong on his lap, but yeah, we'll see what happens. It is an interesting story though, because Ollie Behrman has hit the ground running. Obviously, neither one of them had a good weekend in Australia, but Ollie Behrman has had two very good weekends in a row now.
Now on to Q2, the bottom five consisting of Pierre Gasly, Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, Liam Lawson, and Yuki Tsunoda, with a top three of Lando Norris, George Russell once again in second, and Max Verstappen taking third spot. Let's talk about the two protagonists, the two Red Bull protagonists, because Max Verstappen's just plodding along in Max Verstappen racing. Let's talk about Red Bull racing, and let's talk about Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda. Obviously, before we recorded, before the Japanese Grand Prix, we set off our usual predictions and we wrote them down just so we've got them for future reference. And you actually put Lawson to outqualify Sonoda. And don't get me wrong, Yuki Tsunoda looked fantastic on Friday. What happened on Saturday? It just completely spiraled out of control, and then to compound it with Liam Lawson outqualifying him as well, it just shows that second Red Bull car is a different beast, and it's very hard to tame.
Yeah, like you said, he obviously got knocked out and got beaten by Liam Lawson, which I did predict, but that's not anything against Yuki Tsunoda because, like you said, he looked very good on the Friday, and even in Q1, he was within 10th, I think it was, of Max Verstappen. So I think Yuki Tsunoda might be the man to bridge that gap, and he can become a mainstay in that team. He just wasn't able to get it all together, I don't think. And but there was signs of improvement, and you can't really judge his racecraft because it was just so difficult to overtake. So we'll have to see at a track like Bahrain. I think overtaking is definitely possible. We've seen lots of overtaking there in the past. So that is going to be a much better judgment of where Sonoda is. But the early signs were promising. They were promising. He just couldn't get it all together. But I'm not complaining because I will take that point for the predictions.
Yeah, of course you will. You just run away with it and take it. Let's talk about Carlos Sainz because the head to head between him and Albon, I believe, is 3-0 now in Albon's favour in qualifying. And whether he's still in a bit of a bedding period, it could be said. Um, but it doesn't look great. Well, I mean, I say it doesn't look great. It's the start of a new season, and he's in a new team. But when it came to Carlos Sainz, a lot of people were hyping him up and saying, obviously, that he's going to be consistently in and around the top 10. And he is. He's on the brink of the top 10, but unfortunately, unlike his teammate, he's not able to, extract those extra few tenths to get himself into Q3 as he qualified in 12th, but then was dropped because of a penalty, as he was impeding Lewis Hamilton on his last flying lap. Ethan, what have you made of Carlos Sainz's start to his life at Williams? It's good, but there's definitely improvement needed for him to be a mainstay in Q3 and be scoring regular points for Williams.
Yeah, I think it was James Vowles that came out and said it will take around 5 races for Carlos Sainz to get up to speed, and I don't think that's particularly unreasonable. I think that it's the little, even the little intricate things when it comes to like the power unit, they're going to be things that he's constantly learning. Yuki Tsunoda said that during every single one of his the race laps on Sunday, he was learning about the car still. So it's not something that happens overnight. We're now 3 races in, so you'd expect to see a slight upturn in form. Obviously, he was closer to Albon. Um, he was only half a tenth off him in Q2. It's just that was the difference between ninth and 12th for between the two of them. So he's not far away. It's just obviously Albon's been at that team for I think this is going to be his 4th year at Williams. So he's a lot more accustomed to the team, to just the little things that Science will not be. So let's see what happens. Let's give him a bit of time. Let's see what happens where we are in another 3 or 4 races. If he's still not able to match or beat Albon, then there might start to be a few question marks. But until then, I think we can give him the benefit of the doubt, given that he's a multiple race winner.
Okay, let's move on to Q3. And a certain Max Verstappen, came out of absolutely nowhere, right, and got himself pole position. Care to explain, Ethan, how that happened? Like, it was out the blue. Nobody expected him. Everybody expected the two front-running McLarens to be on pole. Max Verstappen steals it by a tidgy-widgy margin.
Yeah, I can't explain it really. I think it's the only way you can explain it is that it is just the Max Verstappen factor. He is just that he is that good. He is an unbelievable driver, and I think that if he manages to somehow win the title this season, he will put himself in the top 3 of all time. I think that that is the standard of driver we're talking about here. He's done a fantastic job. And that was a lap from absolutely nowhere. The Red Bull hasn't looked good all season. But like I said, that is the effect that Max Verstappen will have, that he is just that good. So I don't really know what else I can say other than you just got to stand there and applaud him, because we're witnessing a fantastic driver.
On the other hand, with McLaren in second and third, do you see it as potentially a missed opportunity for McLaren, especially with them having the quicker car and the Red Bull being at times the fourth quickest car, like we saw last season and like we saw at the start of this term, apart from obviously Japan where Max was very, very strong.
Yeah, I think the race is a missed opportunity, because it's so difficult to overtake, and yet McLaren haven't tried to do something different. There were very, very few overtakes. It's probably going to be one of the lowest ever number of overtakes in on a Formula One race. I don't know the exact number, but I can imagine it's very low. And the fact that out of the top 10 there was only one position change, and that was Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari overtaking Isaac Hadjar in an RB, where you'd expect that to happen. So I think there was a missed opportunity. McLaren needed to do something a little bit different with Piastri, maybe go short with one of them, go long with the other. But because I think they ended up winning by about 15 seconds, those top 3 were clear of Leclerc in fourth. So they've got to try something different in that scenario, but they bowled it, and this is what we were all a bit concerned about at the start of the season, is that McLaren might have the quickest car, but they definitely don't have the best strategy team behind them. They're not ruthless enough. They're not used to being in those positions. You look at a Red Bull, there was absolutely no hesitation. If it was the roles were reversed and you had, for instance, let's say Tsunoda's performance at the same level as Verstappen, and you've got Verstappen and Tsunoda up against Norris, I guarantee Red Bull win that race with one of their drivers.
Yeah, that might be the case, but a lot of if buts and maybes and not a lot of answers were done, and not a lot of answering was done by McLaren at the Japanese Grand Prix. Let's talk about 3 rookies: Antonelli, Hadjar, Behrman. 3 rookies inside the top 10. Antonelli in sixth, Hadjar in seventh, and then Behrman in 10th. I mean, Antonelli, okay, you're expecting it. Hadjar, this is a beautiful stat. Since the first opening race of the season, Hadjar has been consistently qualifying as well outside the top 4 teams, the best of the rest. He qualified it highly in China and well here around in Japan as well. Behrman as well. He's starting to hit form. The rookies, is there? Could you say there's a little bit more of a bridge now between F2 and F1, especially with the rookies seemingly doing so well in obviously the top tier of motorsports now?
No, I think it's always been the same case. It's if you're good enough, then you will be able to make that step forward. Like look at Oscar Piastri. He's competing right up there. I think he could easily be in a championship battle this season, and it's the third season in Formula One. You saw it with Charles Leclerc getting the Ferrari seat after just one season of F1. Max Verstappen after what a year and four races getting promoted to the Red Bull team. If you're good enough, you will make that step up. And I think Isaac Hadjar has shown that he is good enough. He is able to make that step up as he obviously had a very, very disappointing weekend in Australia, not able to make the start of the race. But since then, you cannot fault him at all. I think he's been pretty much flawless, and it was a fantastic performance all weekend from him in Japan.
So just to round off Q3, the top 10 looked like this. It was Max Verstappen on pole with Lando Norris alongside him. On the second row, it was Oscar Piastri alongside the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. It was an all Mercedes third row with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli in fifth and sixth. Isaac Hadjar was alongside his idol Lewis Hamilton on the fourth row, and Alex Albon paired up with Ollie Behrman on the fifth row in ninth and tenth. Um, let's move on to our average driver ratings. And without further ado, 10 out of 10, Max Verstappen, completely flawless from start to finish. He could not have done anything different. He defended very well. He held his position very well. Obviously, he had that little bit of an incident with Lando Norris out from on the pit exit, but he could not have done anything different because if he was going to move a little bit further to the left, he would have crossed the white line and he would have got himself a penalty. So it's a clear cut 10 out of 10. The Red Bull's not been as strong as it has been for the last couple of seasons. But as we said, it's the Max Verstappen effect, and he put it out in full flow in Japan and scored himself some valuable points in the championship. Only 1 point between him and Lando Norris now in the championship. It's certainly shaping up to be a very tight season, but Max Verstappen was completely flawless in Japan.
Yeah, completely agreed. 10 out of 10. This is what I was talking about last weekend in China when Norris could only manage eighth in the sprint race. You know, if he finishes fourth, that's an extra 4 points, and he's got a 5 point gap, and it's just those small margins throughout the season that can really count. Verstappen done everything right in Japan. I don't think Norris actually got DRS on Verstappen. Particularly in that second stint, he didn't. It looked more likely that Piastri was going to overtake Norris and Norris was going to overtake Verstappen. It looked like Verstappen was just managing that brilliantly. He had him where he wanted him, and he wasn't phased by the pressure at all. Didn't put a foot wrong, as you'd expect from a four-time world champion. But it was a fantastic performance, and like you said, there's absolutely nothing in that incident. It's more of an unsafe release from McLaren than it is from forcing him off the track, because I don't think Verstappen's actually moved at all. And I think even Norris was admitting that in his post-race interviews and like in the cool-down room as well. You can see he wasn't really too pressed about it because he could see that there's nothing in it at all. So brilliant from Verstappen, and like you said, he's only 1 point behind Norris in the Drivers' Championship. From not bad considering as pretty much everybody ruled him out.
On to P2 man Lando Norris, qualified in second and finished in second. Yeah, again, I don't think he really put a foot wrong, Lando Norris, but obviously we can't give him the same grade as Max Verstappen because McLaren do have a superior car. I've still gone with a 9 out of 10. I think the performance was good for McLaren. Um, it's obviously not Lando Norris's fault that the strategy wasn't optimal. You know, I think if Oscar Piastri got that run on Lando Norris, you potentially could see a switch of positions, which could have benefited McLaren a little bit more, as I think Oscar Piastri had a little bit more pace than Lando Norris did in Japan. Um, but McLaren didn't do that. like you mentioned briefly at the start, I don't think McLaren are ruthless enough. I don't think they have that cutthroat sort of decision making just yet. Um, but it'll come with time. But I think Lando Norris still performed very, very well, and obviously brought home a P2 for the team. So it's a 9 out of 10 from me.
I may as well give Norris and Piastri at the same time because I've gone for 8 for both of them. I thought it was a good performance. Eight's nothing to nothing to complain about. It's still a very good grade. I just think it's a missed opportunity. I think they should be winning that race. Obviously, I don't know how much you can really say that McLaren bottled pole position to Verstappen just absolutely ran that car into the ground and was not accepting anything else but a pole position. And then from pole position, it was always going to be a Max Verstappen victory. But I think they'll be upset with themselves that they didn't do more. They didn't put more pressure on Verstappen. They didn't. There wasn't, like I said, there was at no point I thought that Norris was going to overtake Verstappen. The time he got closest was in the pit lane, and then even still, why are they pitting the same lap as him? Why are they not rolling the dice? If you see Verstappen coming into the pits, stay out a lap longer in case there's a safety car, or you can perform the overcut if they had a bad stop. All of these different factors, I just don't think that McLaren maximised her weekend. So I've gone for an 8 for both of them. Good performances, don't get me wrong, but not quite. I can't give any higher. When I look at some of the grades I've given to a couple of these drivers, I can't give higher than an 8.
Okay. Well, I'll give my grade for Oscar Piastri. I've also settled with a 9 out of 10. I think the two McLarens kind of matched each other in a sense. But like you said, they weren't cutthroat enough with their opportunities that they had, and the opportunities were going to be limited at a track like Japan, where we saw limited overtaking opportunities. On to Charles Leclerc, who qualified fourth and finished fourth. Um, the thing is, I'm quite torn because it's from our perspective, the Ferrari realistically was never going to be as quick as the McLaren, and wasn't going to be anywhere near Max Verstappen from what he showed on Saturday. But comfortably kept Russell and Antonelli behind. So I'm torn between an 8 and a 9. So I'm going to slot in with an 8.5 out of 10. I think Leclerc obviously 15 seconds away from the race lead, yes. But he held on to fourth place very well. Kept the gap between him and Russell and Antonelli to a good distance, and held on to fourth place very well. I don't think he could have done much more. Like I mentioned, two McLarens and Verstappen were leagues above the Ferraris and the Mercedes in Japan. But he held on to fourth place and wasn't letting it go at any point. So it's a very good race for Charles. It's just for us Ferrari fans, it's a bit annoying that we can't challenge those at the front, because last season the car looked so good. This season it started a little bit shaky, you know. But I think it was still a good performance from Charles Leclerc, so I've gone with an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I've gone slightly higher. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 because I don't know. There wasn't much more he could really do in that race. Like you said, they were much slower than the McLarens and Verstappen. But I think that to hold off Russell, who did put him under a fair bit of pressure, he held his nerve. He drove very cleanly. And yeah, I think the 15-second gap might be a bit misleading. But there was no way he could have finished third unless there was an incident or unless he got ahead of Piastri at the start. So almost up there, but I think a 9 out of 10 is right for Leclerc in this scenario.
On to George Russell, in fifth, qualified fifth, and obviously finished fifth. I'm gonna slap him with an 8. I think that Mercedes, I think, were stronger than Ferrari when it came to Japan. I think, like you mentioned, I think Leclerc just held his nerve very well, and was managing everything when it came to what George Russell threw his way. But I think George is consistently showing that he can be a team leader and that he can, you know, fight for a world championship. It just depends on what sort of package the Mercedes brings, because if he was to have overtaken Leclerc for fourth, do you see him closing the gap on the two McLarens? Probably not. But I think he drove a good race. It's not like one of them races where Leclerc's in fourth and he's miles behind. He's tucked behind Leclerc. He's just unable to get past because of the defending of Charles Leclerc, and the defending prowess that the Monegasque driver showed. Still a good race, but I think this one is also a bit of a missed opportunities for the Mercedes. Just so little overtaking opportunities around Japan, and Mercedes weren't able to capitalize on a strong pace. I feel because even Antonelli, in his second stint, showed a very strong pace. But we'll talk about him in just a second. But George Russell, 8 out of 10. It was a good race, but I think a missed opportunity to get P4. I think.
Yeah, I agree. I've gone for an 8 out of 10 as well. And I do agree with a lot of what you've said. It's a mixture of very, very good defending from Leclerc and the circuit not being particularly suited for overtaking with the current cars. Russell was on the back of Leclerc for the majority of the race, and it was one of those you just couldn't get the overtake done. So I think a fifth place is still a good result in this scenario, but I do agree. I think that Mercedes may have had a slight advantage over Ferrari in this on this weekend. So a good performance, but maybe they'll be a little bit disappointed they didn't get more from it. So it is an 8 out of 10 from me as well.
On to Kimi Antonelli, who qualified in sixth and finished in sixth. Gone with the same grade as George Russell. Broke two records in the process in Japan. The youngest ever race leader, and the youngest ever driver to get a fastest lap. And obviously, Kimi Antonelli is still getting his feet in the Mercedes door sort of thing, because there's always going to be elements of rookiness. Is rookiness even a word? I've just made it up. If it's not a word, I've made it up. It's a new term, rookiness. There's always going to be elements of that, but he showed a fantastic pace. Extended his first stint tremendously, and then in the second stint, drove the wheels of that car and was closing in on Russell at a rate of knots. And it was actually very impressive to see the young Italian driver do um, do such a race, because it's not all the time. Like some drivers gambled on the softs. For example, Mr. Lance Stroll and Jack was it Jack Doohan, I think, that started on the softs. And then we saw Carlos Sainz, and Liam Lawson switch to the softs very late. But Kimi Antonelli, fantastic race. His race pace was very good. Just wasn't able to catch up to George Russell to get anywhere near a top five place, but still a fantastic race for the rookie driver.
Yeah, no, I agree again. An 8 out of 10 for me as well for Kimi Antonelli. I said a couple of times this kid is lightning. He is brilliant. To that first stint as well was remarkable. To take those medium tires as long as they went. And then with still good pace as well. He still came out in sixth as well. So he beat Hamilton, who, after overtaking Hadjar, you would expect him to close up to the back of Antonelli because the hard tire was his far superior tire, but he just couldn't. Antonelli maintained that gap. He was very, very good in managing his tires, looking after it, managing that gap. So to do that in only a third Formula One race, and then to set, fastest lap after fastest lap on that second stint on the hard tire, and he closed within about 2 seconds of Russell, I think it was. So you've got to think he's now in his three races in Formula One. He's finished two of them within a couple of seconds of Russell, which we weren't expecting. I don't think. I don't think anybody was expecting him to be this close to Russell's level. this quickly. So it's a fantastic effort from him. He's done a tremendous job so far, and I think it's only a matter of time until we see him get a podium or two.
On to our fellow seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who qualified in eighth and finished seventh, the only on-track move in the top 10. And I've given Lewis Hamilton a 7 out of 10 from where he finished, 7 out of 10. Qualifying behind Isaac Hadjar, definitely not a positive. I see that as a massive negative. And Lewis Hamilton has gone out and said that they've got a slight issue with a car, which is losing him a tenth a lap. So you can blame it ever so slightly on the car, but he was nowhere near Charles Leclerc this weekend. He was quite a bit off the two Mercedes cars as well. He obviously closed the gap on Kimi Antonelli after Antonelli pitted, but wasn't able to make the move done. So kind of was unable to get up to sixth and potentially defend that place. But yeah, just a bit of a shaky start for Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. Hamilton would have probably wanted a much more smoother ride, but hey, everybody says that Ferrari is not the move for everybody, and there's always going to be shakes and nerves and bumps in the road. So Lewis Hamilton has just got to kind of keep going and kind of maintain that kind of strong mind and willingness to perform better at Ferrari. But Japan just wasn't it for Lewis Hamilton, and it was a bit of a mid race for Hamilton.
Yeah, I agree with a 7 out of 10. I think the damage was done in qualifying. He was only half a tenth off qualifying in sixth, and it's 3 tenths but off his teammate in who's in fourth. So if he qualifies higher up, he finishes higher up. As simple as that. We've seen how difficult it is to overtake. I think if you swap Leclerc and Hamilton's starting positions, they will finish in the same positions. I think Leclerc would have finished seventh, and Hamilton would have finished fourth. Um, but that's why I got to knock him down a mark because qualifying was so important here. And he did miss that opportunity. So that he's shown he's got some pace. He won the sprint in China, and he done that fantastic. He was fantastic in that sprint race. And in qualifying for the sprint as well, because no one really expected him to get there. So there's been positives to take from these first three races, but like we said for Carlos Sainz, like we were saying for a number of drivers this season, the betting in process will take a few races. It's the intricate little things like Lewis Hamilton's been driving with a Mercedes power unit in his car for since he came into the sport, which is 18 years. It's going to take time to adapt to just the feeling of the new power unit, the intricacies, the upshifts, the downshift, when the optimal temperature is for the engine. All of these things that you don't really think about, they're going to play an impact. So I'm not worried about it, really. Obviously, with those DNFs and everything, it's not looking good in the Drivers' Championship. They are some way behind like the Mercedes. So that it's not looking good on paper, but I'm not too worried at this point of the season. Ask me again in 5 races if this is still happening. I might have a different answer, but for now, I'm not too worried.
On to P8 man now, Isaac Hadjar, who qualified seventh and obviously finished eighth, getting overtaken by Lewis Hamilton. I'm torn, because I really do want to give him a 10 out of 10. But then again, I know you usually don't give point fives, but I'm going to give him a point five. I'm going to go for 9.5. And the only reason why is because of Hamilton getting past. Because I don't like, you know, nah, Bonnet. Nah, I'm giving him a 10. I can't. I can't. I can't. I'm trying to make excuses here. No, I'll give him a 10 out of 10. Isaac Hadjar, seriously, round of applause. You've not only blown your more experienced teammate in loose quotation marks out of the water, but you've got it in the points and you've outqualified a seven-time world champion in the process. He could not have done anything more. Simply unstoppable. Isaac Hadjar, from when obviously the season started, you're looking at a couple of the rookies. You're looking at Antonelli. You're looking at Lawson, who's obviously been axed from Red Bull. Isaac Hadjar probably goes under the radar a little bit. He's certainly put himself on the map now. Points finish. Finally got his points under his belt, his first points in F1, and to do it in such a commanding way and to beat your teammate in such a manner. It's a perfect. Well, I mean, it's not a perfect start to his F1 life because Australia, we saw what happened in Australia, but the last two races have been tremendous, and for him to get his points, it's finally a bit of relief off his shoulders that he's finally got his first points on the board and he can finally be free and do what he does best. But in Japan, he was very good. And to out qualify a 7-time world champion, it speaks volumes. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to throw hands if you were going to say that you're not going to give him a 10 out of 10. No, it was a fantastic performance from Hadjar from start to finish. Let's his three qualifying performances are 11th, 7th, and 7th. He's done very well since he's come into the sport, and it was a brilliant performance. There was no way he was going to keep Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari behind him. So you've got to say hats off to Isaac Hadjar, brilliant performance, and he'll make a name for himself if he continues with performances like this. It won't go under the radar. And you never know. Maybe after the next race, if Red Bull decide they're going to drop Sonoda, then he's the next one in line, isn't he? So let's see what happens with that. He's performing very, very well. I think he's got a lot of natural talent, and I think you can see that. He's a good driver.
Oh yeah, it's technically you're right. Isaac Hadjar would be in line, and then you'd have the domino effect of Arvid Lindblad, Ayumu Iwasa, and all the rest of the Red Bull juniors wants to come into play. Let's move on to P9 man Alex Albon, qualified ninth, finished ninth. 9 out of 10 for Mr. Nine, I think. It's quite poetic. Ninth place in qualifying, ninth place for the race. 9 out of 10. Alex Albon is certainly hitting top form, and he's showing that he is no pushover to Carlos Sainz. He is showing that he's here to fight, and is certainly showing that fight because in Japan, obviously he wasn't able to kind of bridge that gap on Isaac Hadjar and get eighth place. But I think Williams are showing signs of improvement, and especially with Alex Albon, he's leading the charge for Williams, and a little bit of a resurgence is happening at the team. But for Japan, it's a 9 out of 10 for Alex Albon.
Yeah, I do agree. I almost had him down as an 8 at first, but I've changed my mind. I've decided to go for a 9 out of 10 as well. It was a very good performance. And like we said for the last two races, there was a lot of talk around Carlos Sainz, and maybe a few people underestimated Alex Albon, but I don't think they'll be underestimating him anymore because he's produced three very, very good performances. He's actually above Lewis Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship as well. So, it's not bad going, is it? And he's got more points than he did last season, more points than Williams did last season. So it goes to show, I think he has taken a step up now that the car is there underneath him. He's able to produce a bit more of the performance that we expect from Alex Albon because, it was only in 2023 that he had an exceptional season. He was performing to a brilliant standard, and he was one of the first names on everybody's radar. But slightly disappointing in 2024, but it's kicked back, and he's came back with a bit of a point to prove, I think it is. So good performance, 9 out of 10.
On to Ollie Behrman, who qualified in 10th and finished in 10th. Are you going to throw hands if I don't give it 10 out of 10? No, you won't. I've gone for a 10. I've gone for a straight 10 for Ollie Behrman. I think he's shown that he is comfortably, obviously not in the quickest car. Probably if you look at all the rookies in the field, Probably out of all these guys, he's probably on par with. I wouldn't say on par with Bortoletto in terms of car. Maybe sandwiched between Bortoletto and Doing because the Alpine has looked strong as well with Gasly, not with Doing. But in terms of talent, the guy has shown that he's got talent, and especially with his performances in the Ferrari previously and in the Haas previously as well, he's shown that he can be a regular point scorer, back-to-back points as well. And yeah, I don't think you can add much more about Ollie Behrman because him and Kimi Antonelli, they were teammates at Prema last season, sharing obviously a garage together. Well, one driver was on one side, one driver was on the other side. But they've shown that they've sort of hit the ground running straight away in Formula One. And after a tricky Australian Grand Prix for Ollie Behrman, he's hit form. And he's certainly showing that no matter what sort of car he's in, he's able to perform and he's able to get points, and he's done it once again. So for me, it's a 10 out of 10. I think that Ollie Behrman will go a long way. And with him, I think still linked with the Ferrari Driver Academy. Maybe after Hamilton moves on, maybe he jumps into the Ferrari. We'll have to wait and see. But he's certainly doing no harm to his Formula One status and his driver value because it's another very, very good drive. 10 out of 10.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10. I don't want to ruin the hype train, but it was a very good performance. Don't get me wrong, but I can't give him a 10 out of 10 because he finished higher last week and he got a 10 out of 10. So I know a couple of those positions were inherited through the DNF, but it was an exceptional performance. Went from 10th to 10th, showed a good level of maturity, and was able to really get everything out of the car when his teammates struggled. And finished down in 18th, but I can't give him any higher than a 9. But it's still a 9 out of 10. It's not as if I'm giving him a 3.
Yeah, I was about to say if you gave him a three, I'd be throwing hands because Ollie Behrman is one of my faves. On to Fernando Alonso, who qualified in 13th, got moved up to 12th because of Carlos Sainz's penalty, and finished in 11th. 7 out of 10, I think, for Fernando. Aston Martin are, like I've said on a lot of the podcast episodes, very yo-yo team. They're very hit and miss. And when it came to the Japanese Grand Prix, because gaining positions was at an absolute premium, Fernando Alonso only gained the place because of Pierre Gasly, and he finished ahead of Pierre Gasly and ahead of a Red Bull of Yuki Tsunoda. Um, it's good, but it's not the performance of Hadjar, Albon, or Behrman, who obviously outperformed Fernando Alonso and outperformed a multiple world champion. Yeah, very hit and miss Aston Martin. Adrian Newey seriously needs to work on that 2026 car for them to salvage anything because I think, like I mentioned, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Very, very hit and miss, very hot and cold, very blowing hot and cold. And at the moment, I think it's blowing a little bit more colder than it is hotter for Aston Martin.
Yeah, I've gone for a 7 out of 10. I thought it was solid from Fernando Alonso. I thought he needed this weekend because he's had a couple of retirements, which was disappointing to say the least. And I just think that having a solid race, he defended brilliantly from Tsunoda as well. I know he's only just got into that Red Bull car, so he's still learning, but he defended very well. And on another day, when there was maybe a bit more overtaking to be done, he could have got a point or two. But um, solid. And it shows that a couple of races don't define you. He's not by no means past it or on the way down. He's just suffered a couple of disappointing races, but he's kicked back on, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a decent amount of points in the next two races for the rest of the triple header. I think he's just that good a driver, but like I said, he's come back to form. I think 7 out of 10 is a good performance, and he's shown what he's about.
On to Yuki Tsunoda in 12th, qualified 15th, started 14th, and finished in 12th. I've also gone for a 7. I think that for Yuki, it was always going to be a bit troublesome, especially with the amount of talk that he had from the whole paddock and the media regarding his promotion to Red Bull, replacing Liam Lawson, who only lasted two races. And the talk of the town was always going to be Yuki Tsunoda, especially in his home race. And he did find it hard. Don't get me wrong. He was showing absolutely fantastic pace on the Friday. On the Saturday, it kind of unravelled. On the Sunday, he picked it up a little bit, but wasn't able to get into the points, and missing out by just two places. But it's a decent start. His next step, I think, is actually getting into Q3 and finishing in the points. I think that's the next step for Yuki Tsunoda, and whether he can succeed in doing so at the Bahrain Grand Prix, we will have to wait and see. But I think it's a decent start. It's not the start that obviously Liam Lawson had when he was qualifying at the back of the grid. He was able to complete the goal of qualifying into Q2. But his next step is really getting into Q3 and succeeding on getting points. But for Japan, I think it was a decent enough race for him, and a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I've just gone one lower. I've gone for a 6 out of 10. It was decent, but I can't be giving him much higher than a 6 out of 10. I don't think because you look at where his teammate is in comparison. I know we've spoken about how good Max Verstappen is, but he is still almost a lap down. I think it was about 60 odd seconds between he was off the leader. So it was a good performance, a good first outing, considering he's just been chucked in that seat. And I expect him to grow from here. But on this performance alone, I think a 6 out of 10 is fair.
On to Pierre Gasly, who qualified 11th and finished 13th, losing two places in the process to Fernando Alonso and Yuki Tsunoda. 6 out of 10. I think, very average. It's hard, when overtakes are at a premium and you get sort of overtaken, whether it's because of pit stops or whether it's on track. It's a little bit hard to take, and Pierre Gasly was obviously on the receiving end of those overtakes being done on him. But it just wasn't meant to be, I think, for the Alpine. It's a step in the right direction still for the team, because if you just remember 12 months ago where they were at, and now they're obviously fighting on the brink of the points. It's a step in the right direction, but yeah, it just wasn't meant to be for Pierre Gasly. And he finished 13th and a bit off the points. So yeah, 6 out of 10, I think.
Yeah, I've gone for a 5 out of 10, so just one lower again. He had a very nice battle with Alonso on the first lap. I have to say they were battling for most of that first lap, and that was probably about as entertaining as the racing got, I'd say. But yeah, it was an all right performance. I've just gone straight down the middle because I can't say he really stood out too much, did he? He obviously lost a couple of places, but it wasn't the best performance. It wasn't the worst performance. It was just a bit average, wasn't it? I think this is a bit of the tax you pay when the race is a bit dull, is that you don't particularly know how every single driver's specific races were. And I think this is just one of them. So I've gone straight down the middle, 5 out of 10.
On to Mr. Smooth Operator, who didn't really have a smooth operation in Japan because he got himself a penalty, which bumped him down to 15th after qualifying 12th and finished in 14th. He had a bit of a gamble. He put on his soft boots in the dying embers of a race, in a bid to climb the order. Him and Liam Lawson didn't really work. Um, yeah, I'm giving him a 5. I don't think I can give him the same as Pierre Gasly because of his qualifying performance, and he finished a place lower. So I'm going to go with 5 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. It's been tricky some for Carlos, but it's still a betting process for him. So I'm obviously not expecting to be in it to win it from the start. I think it will take time for him to actually bet into the team and bet into the car and finally score some regular points. So I've settled with a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I've gone for a 5 out of 10 as well. I think he's very, very unlucky in qualifying because his team just haven't told him about Hamilton at all. They've not given him a heads up that Hamilton's going to be on a flying lap. Just mind out the way. He's almost there, completely on his own. No, no communication. The soft tires in the second stint didn't work. Probably in hindsight would have been best off going on to a set of mediums. But yeah, like we said, it's going to take some time to get into bed into the team. So 5 out of 10.
On to Mr. Jack Doohan, who, in essence, actually made up the most places out of all the 20 drivers in the field. He qualified in 19th and finished 15th, but I don't think I could give him more than a 5 out of 10. I think that it's been a bit of a rough weekend for Jack Doohan, especially with that crash on the Friday. Then on the Saturday, he was a bit shaky, qualifying in 19th. And the race, fortunes did change for him a little bit. But then again, I think he was a little bit off his teammate as well, and finishing 15th. It's just, again, for Alpine, it's a step in the right direction. He's cost him a bit of money with that crash, but it's a step in the right direction. And he's got to take more steps in the right direction if he is to save his seat for the whole duration of the season, because Franco Colapinto is sniffing at that seat. And one or two slip ups from Jack Doohan could give Franco that seat. So a little less of a crasher's Jack and more of a pushing on the points and potentially clinching points. I think will get you to keep that seat. But this weekend it's a bit of a mixed bag for Jack Doohan. So I've gone with a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, agreed. I know he made up 4 positions, but he's gone from 19th to 15th, hasn't he? So he's not threatening the top 10. I think, like I said, for a couple of drivers, the work comes in qualifying. That's where the key is, and I think that's. You look at the calendar, actually, a lot of these tracks it's going to be difficult to overtake at. So they need to be up there in qualifying. And Doohan wasn't, and that's what's cost him in the end. That's what's made him finish all the way down in 15th when his teammates finished 13th, and he was for a long time fighting for points, Pierre Gasly. 5 out of 10 then from Doohan. I can't really say anything else.
On to Nico Hülkenberg. And I needed to do that because I've not done that in a long time, so I just thought I'd do it here. Qualified 16th, finished 16th, 5 out of 10. Um, I don't think the Saubers were kind of in the races at all. Um, they like you mentioned, it's quite hard to grade these drivers because essentially where the grading's at is for qualifying, and Nico Hulkenberg couldn't get himself out of Q1 into Q2, so it's quite hard to give him anything more than a 5 out of 10. And he's obviously been beaten by Jack Doohan, who started behind him. So yeah, I've settled. The thing is, I've settled with a lot of 5 out of 10s, but I think the last couple of drivers are quite clear cut 5 out of 10. So it's another 5 out of 10 from me.
I don't think you could have said 5 out of 10 in that sentence anymore.
I'll
That
say it
was
again,
yeah,
5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. Yeah, 5 out of 10 from me as well. It was again, like I said, for these drivers, it is difficult to judge them because at the end of the day, because there's not a lot of racing going on, you can't judge drivers on their pace because at the end it becomes a bit of a train. No overtaking going on. So yeah, it's a difficult one to judge, but I think that Hulkenberg, he'll be disappointed. He got some very good points in Australia, but then since then hasn't had the best of races, has he? 16th to 16th, 5 out of 10, straight down the middle. You can't. He was in that train from about Doohan to Bortoletto, I think it was, but he's beaten his teammates, so I've gone for a 5 out of 10.
And to Liam Lawson, who qualified 13th, qualified 14th, started 13th, but finished all the way down in 17th. When you compare him to his teammate, he's nowhere to be seen. Similarly to Carlos Sainz, tried to make the gamble on the soft tyres, completely backfired, didn't really work. You know what? I'm gonna give him a 4. I'm gonna be a bit lenient because his head's not in the right head. Mentally, I don't think he will be okay after what happened between him and Red Bull. And jumping back to his old team, he's obviously not going to need a lot of time to bet himself back with the race engineers and the car and stuff, because he should know it like the back of his hand because he was there mere months ago. It's going to be a bit of a different process, obviously, between RB and Red Bull. Um, but to be beaten so commandingly by his rookie teammate, by his more or less experienced teammate, I wouldn't say it's embarrassing, but it just shows that mentally, I think Liam Lawson is not at the racetrack. He's thinking about something else. But yeah, I've gone with a 4 out of 10. I think just Japan, he just needs a bit of a mental reset. Liam Lawson, get himself in the right headspace and just go again.
Yeah, you got to admire the trying something different. Like we criticise McLaren for not trying something different. So I think I've got to give a little bit of credit for to try something different, like, as well as Carlos Sainz, but it backfired a bit. There was no real pace in the softs. They didn't have the effect that you wanted them to, and then he got overtaken by Sainz, and he dropped down the order. I think he finished 17th in the end. So a disappointing one. But yeah, I think Lawson is paying for Red Bull's mistakes. We said in the off season it should have been Tsunoda in that seat. It was clear to see, and they've made the decision 2 races in. So they obviously knew they made the wrong decision. And Lawson is unfortunately the person that's got to pay for that. He's got to pay for Red Bull almost throwing him under the bus. I think he will come good. I do think he will come good because we saw it last season. We saw it in 2023 as well. There's a good driver in there. It's just about unlocking that and putting him in the right frame of mind to move forward and to be able to show what he's about. But for now, I don't think he's been able to do that. And I'm hoping in Bahrain, which is a track that he obviously has driven at before, unlike Australia and China, where he was in the Red Bull. Done a lot of laps in preseason testing. I think he would have been. He was obviously in the RB camp the last couple of years as well, so he can hopefully continue to grow and to develop and yeah, come back from this.
I'm going to group the last three drivers because it's essentially just a little bit tedious talking about qualifying and not much of a race. So for Esteban Ocon, I've set with a 4 out of 10. For Gabriel Bortoleto, also a 4. And for Lance Stroll, I'm going to settle with a 1 out of 10. No, I'm joking. I'm not giving I'm giving Lance Stroll a 1. I've given him a 3. Um, but those three drivers, anonymous. Not really much happening between a lot of them. And yeah, back of a pack and kind of just trundling along. And I've given obviously Stroll a bit of a lower grade because he got lapped. He was the only driver that got lapped. So yeah, quite self-explanatory in a sense.
Yeah, so for Esteban Ocon, I've gone for a 3 out of 10 actually, because of how far from his teammate he was. You know, his teammate's finishing in 10th and he's finishing in 18th. And like I said, all of that comes down because of qualifying, but he still hasn't put himself in a good space from qualifying. So it's his fault for not qualifying higher up the order. And then yeah, from there, it was always going to be a difficult race. So I've gone for a 3 out of 10 for him. Bortoleto, I've gone for a 4 out of 10. I have to mark him slightly lower than his teammate because he was a few positions down, especially qualifying next to each other on the grid as well. He dropped back. And then for Lance Stroll, I've gone for a 2 out of 10 actually because he was shocking from start to finish. Like I said, he's the only driver that got lapped. I know he done a two-stopper, but still, it was shocking performance, and that after a couple of decent races, this is the type of performance that he puts in, and this is why we have such an issue with Lance Stroll, was because we all know about the money his father puts in, and he will occasionally produce some good performances, but it was a shocking performance here again today.
So review now our Japanese Grand Prix predictions before we kind of look ahead to the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. So for my two-star predictions, I went for Lawson in the points for RB, which did not happen, and a safety car, which did not happen. Obviously, there's obviously been a couple of safety cars in the Japanese Grand Prix prior to this one. But this one just didn't seem to be it. And then Liam Lawson, qualified Tsunoda, who was not able to progress and get himself into the points. Ethan, how did you get on in your two-star predictions?
So I had Lawson to outqualify Sonoda. I just had a sneaking feeling that Sonoda would struggle to get up to speed initially, and that proved okay. I had a red flag as well because there's been a fair few red flags over recent years at Suzuka, but that didn't come through.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, technically, they did come through in the practice sessions, but no, doesn't count.
No, practice doesn't
Let's
count. Qualifying, I would argue it, but practice, no.
Okay. Let's move on to looking at qualifying in the race. So for qualifying, I predicted Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell. I actually, I actually perfectly got the five drivers to be in the top five, but only got George Russell correctly. And then for the race, I predicted Norris, Piastri, Russell, Leclerc, Hamilton. I predicted, I think three of the top five well, obviously to be in the top five, but only got Leclerc correct. So I end the prediction week on a whopping 2 out of 12. How did you get on, Ethan? Qualifying in the race.
I'm very annoyed about this. So my top five for qualifying was Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc. So I got the top five correct, but I get 0 out of 5 for that. I obviously had Verstappen 2 places lower, and then that would have been a top three, right? And then I had Russell and Leclerc the wrong way around. For the race, I had Piastri to win. I had Norris as second, so I get a point for that. And then Russell, Verstappen, Hamilton. So I got 4 out of the 5 correct. But again, Russell was 2 spaces too high. Verstappen won the race. I had him fourth. And Piastri, I had to win and finish third. So 2 out of 12 as well. It wasn't my weekend.
Oh, well, it's a draw nonetheless. Okay, let's move on to F3 and F2 talk. We've not done one of these in a long time. We didn't do it after Australia. So let's obviously recap what happened in Formula 3 and in Formula 2. So let's start off with Formula 3, the more junior of the categories. In qualifying, it was Rafael Camara for Trident that qualified on pole position with Noah Stramsted, his Trident teammate, in second. Telfil Neal for Van Amersfoort Racing qualified third. Nikita Bedrin in fourth. Tim Tramnitz in fifth. Charlie Wirtz in sixth. Tanasol Intrapuvasak. I actually heard this name on the commentary, so I've kind of been learning it a little bit better. He qualified seven. Ugo Uchukwu for Prema in eighth, Martinius Stenhorst for High Tech in ninth, and Roman Belinsky in 10th. And obviously in the sprint race, it was Santiago Ramos that started on pole with Matias Zagazeta in second and Belinsky in third, and it was the Van Amersfoort Racing of Santiago Ramos that finished first with Martinez Stenshorner in second and Roman Belinsky in third. And then for the feature race, it was obviously Camara that started on pole ahead of Stromstead. And you betcha, the Brazilian rookie won ahead of his Trident teammate, and then Telfil Neal in third place. In the driver standings, Camara is in first place ahead of Telfil Neal and Noah Stromstead. And then the next driver, who's not a rookie, is Nikita Bedrin, who's fourth on 17 points, and a measly 11 points behind Rafael Camara in the top spot in Formula 3. Let's move on to Formula 2 and let's kind of look at what happened in Formula 2. So the feature race didn't go ahead because of a rain. So we only had the sprint race, which Joshua Dirksen won, with the rookie Leonardo Fornaroli, the F3 champion from last season, finishing second, Luke Browning in third, Richard Verschoor in fourth, Stanek in fifth, Montoya in sixth. It was Miney and then Pepe Marti in eighth. Obviously, it was Victor Martins that got 2 points for pole position as he qualified on pole for the feature race, but that did not actually go ahead. There's also been in the midst of that, they've also had some pre-season testing where they had 3 days of testing. And when it comes to the junior categories, it's a lot more different to what Formula One is, because Formula One's so action packed in its sort of like week after week after week. But when it comes to the junior categories, they have in season testing, especially with this one in Bahrain, and I think they've got one mid season in Barcelona, if I'm not mistaken. They usually have one mid season. Um, Ethan, it's a lot of information to digest, and my throat's getting very, very dry and very, very sore. But tell me, did you catch much action of the F3 or the F2 in Australia? Who you stand out? Who are you looking out for after round one, and who do you think's really impressed you the most from the two junior categories?
Do you know what? I did actually catch a bit of the F2. I think the qualifying or the sprint race was on at about 1 a.m. or something like that. So I actually caught that. I think that Fornaroli obviously is looking good. He won the F3 title last season, and the number of times we've seen the F3 winner go on to win the F2 title. So he's definitely one to watch. I think Luke Browning as well, making that step up, will be one to watch. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how some of those guys that have moved up from F3 to F2 get on with the higher formula. That'd be an interesting watch.
Talking about Luke Browning and F2, there's obviously a couple of drivers that will be making FP1 appearances at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Let's talk about them before we head into our predictions very quickly. So Red Bull have announced that Ayumu Iwasa will drive FP1 on Friday instead of Max Verstappen. Frederick Vesti will replace George Russell. Felipe Drugovich will replace Fernando Alonso at Aston Martin. Luke Browning, who we just spoke about, will replace Carlos Sainz. Rio Hirakawa, who was formerly of Alpine, is now of Haas. He will replace Ollie Behrman in FP1. And then Dino Beganovic will replace Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. There's obviously a couple of drivers there who, like Dino Beganovic, like Luke Browning, are sort of attached to Formula Two sort of duties as well. How do you think it will benefit their weekend jumping into a bit of Formula One machinery, looking at how they kind of stack up to the rest of the field and seeing what they can do in Formula One machinery for I think most of these drivers will be one of the very first times, apart from obviously the young driver testing that will happen in Abu Dhabi.
I mean, it can't hurt, can it? It's good that the obviously I know the teams have got a quota. They've got to field so many young drivers per season, but it is good that they are getting that hands-on experience. At a track like Bahrain, I think it is good because they would have driven it so much, like preseason testing, and when you've got the amount, all of the formulas race there as well. It is one of the most used Formula One circuits, I believe. So a circuit like that is probably the ideal testing ground, as well as someone like Silverstone. So those tracks that they are accustomed to, that they know, that they drive regularly. I think that's the best place for them because it's less of a unknown, because they're already having to adjust to the completely different cars that are being used. So it's good to see. We'll definitely keep our eyes peeled to see how they get on. But yeah, I think let's see what happens with that.
Let's quickly round off our episode 11 with our Bahrain predictions ahead of this weekend's Grand Prix in Bahrain. Let's start off with our star prediction. So I've gone for my first star prediction. I've gone with three rookies in the points again. Whoever, I don't mind. 3 points, three rookies inside the points, and I've gone with the Verstappen top three finish. I think Verstappen is on a hot streak, and I think he will score yet another podium.
I've gone for Tsunoda to get points and a safety car. I think Tsunoda will take another step forward this weekend, and get some points. And I think there's been a fair few safety cars in recent years around Sakir.
And on to our qualifying and race predictions. So for qualifying, I've gone with Lando Norris, ahead of Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri in third. Leclerc and Russell rounding off the top five. And in the race, I've gone with Norris to convert pole into a victory. Oscar Piastri to overtake Max Verstappen to finish second for the Aussie. The Dutchman relegated down to third. And Leclerc, I think, will hold on to fourth place with Hamilton finishing in fifth.
So for qualifying for me, I've gone for Piastri to take pole ahead of Max Verstappen. I've gone Lando Norris in third, Hamilton fourth, and Russell fifth. And then for the race, I've gone for Piastri to become the first two-time winner this season. Norris to overtake Verstappen for second, who will finish third, and then Russell fourth, Hamilton fifth.
That rounds off this episode of On the Grid podcast, episode 11. We'll be back next week reviewing the Bahrain Grand Prix and previewing the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.